Well, it appears today that Walmart has decided to raise its wage, which is good, by the way. That's very good. And this is good news. Walmart is by far one of the largest employers in America, and which is insane, by the way. When your largest employer is a company that is basically a glorified supermarket, you need to restage your economy because that's pretty fucked up. Anyways, let's keep on going. My camera did something weird, but I'll fix that later. So apparently, they upward their wage, and which is good. And people that think that it's not need to realize that that's a grand total of almost. I'm doing the math in my head, so bear with me. It's a good almost a 30% increase. You know, from 10 to 725. So I just know that the numbers for 10 wouldn't be $160 a month working full time. But the reality is that according to labor statistics, most people don't work full time anymore. Most people work part time. And at part time, I'm going to give you a very generous estimate of 100 hours a month. You make roughly $300 more, which is great. Now, the breakdown of this is that, hear me out. Companies cannot hoard money. People do. Companies can't. Companies have to actually do things with their profits, or that company sadly goes out of business. Now, with that being said, companies ultimately, people think that companies aren't here to pay you. Well, partially, yes, they are, because without paying the people, nobody can buy their products. That's simple. Unless you want to move back before capitalism was a thing and become a mercantism, where you got a few rich people and everybody else is so poor that they're eating, and everybody's just poor. You got maybe a few rich people, maybe a couple bourgeoisies per population, but this is not happening. For a capitalist system to work correctly, it needs to be able to dispute wealth back into the wage work. Back into the people, because if you can't, then ultimately what's going to happen is you're going to employ a bunch of people, make a bunch of products, and then have no demand for them because nobody can buy them. I think Walmart, IKEA, Gap, these Intel Industries people have finally understood that, because each one has been systematically raising their wage to about $10-ish, $9. Now, ultimately, these companies can only support the amount of hours of labor it can take to make something. The weirdest argument I ever hear against minimum wage is that they'll lay off people. Well, this assumes a very weird thing about how wages work, particularly, but I'm just going to point this out. If a company can afford to lay you off, you were never vital for that company anyways. A company in theory should only hire the amount of people it actually needs, not the amount of people it wants. If a company really wanted to, it would pretty much hire the largest share of people it could, which is disadvantageous to its own health. You need competition for a healthy economy. So, well, and my philosophy is that it should be up to the companies to hire the wage. It's not a government thing. This should be a company incentive, because it's in every company's best interest to make sure your wage is higher than the cost of living. And the reason why is because you want people to buy more of your own products and in turn buy more other people's products. Even if in non-competing industries. If you're a worker of Walmart, you are a dick if you go out and spend your money other than at another Walmart. Just bear with me on that philosophy. If you give to your competition, you're not helping yourself because you're not driving the sales up in your own store to make your own job vital to that company. But I digress. So this argument that I have is that companies should decide. But the problem was, the last few, I want to say 20 years or so, companies have been afraid to push up the wage. The wage is stagnated, which has tumbled our economy down to the point where the housing bubble was caused mostly by financial markets, by people who wasn't really in middle class trying to buy middle class houses because they can apparently afford the loan. They couldn't afford the house themselves though. They can afford the loan. What does that even mean, by the way? You can afford the loan. Like, it's a 30-year loan. I hope you can afford it. Anybody should be able to afford that loan. Just saying. And, so, as I was going on again, so, more money in your pocket, more money into your employees, more money into the economy. Now, this only works, though, is that if you're in competition. A mandated minimum wage is not the way to go. The proper way to drive up a wage is by competition, or by Walmart has now raised its wage because it's competition, not any major competition, but some of its competition has raised its wage, and they lost workers, and they lost customers. They lost both workers and customers. The other company, Walmart, raises its wage. Company B is now pays its minimum wage. They lose employees. They go over to the Walmart, for example. In order for this company to retain its employees, it has to raise its wage, and so on and so on. And eventually, so wages are a competition. It's your skill set versus how vital is your skill set to that company. People make the mistake it's your skill set versus other people's skill set. It's not, because it's how much are you valued by that company. It's not how much you are valued by your peers that are valued by that company. That's not how this works. The biggest indicator of this is that it used to be high-paying jobs like software engineers, for example, barely get paid anywhere near what they used to. Most software engineers make a median of $40,000 a year now. Used to, they were valued high. They were valued at $100-something thousand. And what happened is that people got the degree. Or even now, the demand isn't actually that much higher. The demand for the software engineers per percent is actually about the same. There's just more of them now, but there's by percent it's the same. The same amount of company for the same amount of expansion needs the same amount of engineers. And no, engineer A can't work for 3 different companies. So what happened is that the job itself evolved to the point where any monkey can do it. And once you get to that point, you're not valued by your employer anymore. You know, same thing with medical staff. There are so many nurses now that it's no longer can we keep this nurse at $60,000 a year. It's now that there's so many of them. Not even competition of themselves, it's the companies that are trying to gobble up the most nurses. Remember this, it's the company, not you, that's the problem. Well, there's only so many nurses that can be gobbled up by hospitals, and then you have surplus. The jobs itself never changed. There's still only this amount of positions, there's still only this amount of people. What changed was that the hospitals valued their workers lower because there was more workers to work with. And if there's more workers to work with, your competition can absorb more workers too. It's not like Nurse A can quit and be paid higher over here in a different hospital, because hospital here has already got all its workers at once. So it's the employer that actually makes the value of the job, because the actual trend for this, most people don't realize this, but the workers' pay gets adapted with the expected boost, not the actual boost, and the expected loss, not the actual loss. So projected numbers is what determines your pay. If this is true, because that's how businesses work, they're not going to cut existing people's pay, and they're not going to cut long-term people's pay. What they are going to do is they're going to say, it's projected we're going to have this many nurses out in the workforce. We can undercut them. And they do. Competition. Because hospitals aren't actually in direct competition of each other. They're essential functions. So Hospital A and Hospital B aren't really trying to grab patients from each other. Wow, this is going to be long. I just realized that I'm at the 11-minute mark. That's why that works. It's the employer that sets the actual. Your skill set doesn't actually make you any more valuable to an employer if that employer knows that it can seek that skill set somewhere else. That's what I was getting at. The employers actually set the pay, not the skill set.